I brought a gaming magazine to school once, the boys obviously gathered around me and together we sank into it. Screenshots alone were enough for us to get pumped. And then an indie game came up, and by their groan, I could tell it felt like this. I could have told them, hey, games are games, but I knew their reaction will be,
my estimation of
ungoogleable games
as a man just fucking plummeted.
During the following decade, my courage to fully delve into indie games did not grow that much since I was still enamored with the AAA, but during the same period, the game industry slowly went auto-destruct, starting as early as 2008. Here's the short version. I held hope until 2021, then I said fuck it, I'm playing the remaining classics, replaying my favorites, and afterwards I finally quit. That did not happen, because 1 year later, indie gaming finally clicked for me, and I discovered that every month enough good games released to last you an year if you know where to look. I made my debut video to celebrate, and this one is a sort of superior sequel, not due to better writing, on the contrary, I am getting idioter every year, but because now, with a full year at my disposal, I could actually include only the games I liked, starting with Trine 5. A good point to start, considering I'm a fan of the series since the beginning, it was my contact with the indie world. In fact, I never had a Trine-less year. This one, well, I've been trying 5 weeks to enjoy it. This would be the perfect moment for silence or a fake awkward remark to signal I'm cool, and I know the joke was corny.
Fuck that. Hear what I said, don't.
I've been trying 5 weeks to enjoy it. And I did many times. Once you solve a puzzle it's always satisfying, and the combat becomes deeper as you progress, but I disagree with the change in philosophy. The first two were a paradise of self-expression, and in co-op the games received a new dimension. I'll never forget the dumb solutions my girlfriend and I conceived sometimes, or the moments my friends sabotaged me. Then they went 3D, it failed, and with the last two, they just capitulated. They went scripted mode, just figure out the only possible order to do things and only grapple designated objects, you can't even draw with the mouse anymore. And worst of all, if by the end of the first one, the wizard could conjure up to 4 boxes, 4 planks and 1 floating platform, for the first third of this you can only create either 1 box or 1 plank. Dude, are you getting senile? So if you're new, I highly recommend to play either this or 4 and then go straight to the first 2, since the plots are like Tom and Jerry. If you're watching this while standing up, you might want to sit now. Okay, ready? No Sun to Worship is worse than Cloak and Dagger Shadow Operations. They're both Splinter Cell made by one guy. But the No Sun developer has experience, which is seen in the animations and the atmosphere department, nothing to complain about there. But unfortunately the game is easy as fuck on the default difficulty, where you can headshot most enemies. On the hard difficulty, you can't headshot anyone, so now the quality of the game is at the mercy of the level design. If many patrolled routes intersect, it suddenly comes into its own and it's a very tense game. And you think about sightlines, timing, and ammo resources for breaking the lights. If they don't, pick out enemies one by one and the story repeats. Cloak and Dagger Shadow Operations. It's a nice find if you're a fan of Splinter Cell 1 to 3, considering there aren't many games that are actually like those, except Vampire Reign. Fucking Splinter Cell Conviction has influenced more games than the good ones in the series. This one is lacking in some departments, but the only one I'm sad about is how stiff the animations are. Outside of that, it's true that less is more. You can't kill anyone, you can only stun them temporarily, and you can't move the bodies, you can't stick to the walls, and most importantly, there is no saving. But the missions are short and open-ended, with a good level design, and with those features missing, you're on edge all the time. You worry about visibility, sometimes you even proceed without having a complete plan, because it's you that doesn't have a visual on a potential threat. I once repeated a level 5 times until I figured out a perfect route. I almost did it all until being discovered and ran away to the end of the level with 10% health. I realized I forgot the keycard and had to sneak back again with my mood at stake. When I pulled it off, I said, damn, this is the
45th
best game of this year. So I definitely recommend this if you like Splinter Cell. Just take into account that this is obviously made by one guy, sometimes zero. So I might be an indie guy, but without brevity the indie onslaught would get tedious. And it was painful enough to cast out around 20 games. I can't do it anymore. So for pacing reasons, a big game, Atomic Heart. Not that I had to force myself to play it. If you put the voices in Russian, the introduction is downright majestic. It has that triply glorious atmosphere which my brain gave up on feeling again. Then the first area is almost survival horror in its design. You are counting your bullets and basically dancing with the enemies so that they never hit you, since you don't know when the next resupply occurs. Then as you enter the open world, the endless respawning enemies put pressure on you to navigate it intelligently. But then again, I'm the only person in the world unbothered by the respawning settlements in Far Cry 2. Then the next mission has well done comedy. It was surprise after surprise for me, top 10 material. Well, as my Game Pass free trial neared its ending, and this is the first and last haha Romanian pirate joke, since I now have a job and I bought all these other games. Now that I addressed the first video's main flaw, I guess we can all agree this video is perfect. Oh yeah, as my Game Pass free trial neared its ending, I did not feel like renewing it just for this game. In fact, I took a 1-year break, which expires in 6 months. So while I recommend Atomic Heart, it's only good in small doses, while you play other games. It simply isn't made for its length. In fact, many shooters would be tedious if they lasted 20 hours, even Halo. Oh. Agatha Christie, Murder on the Orient Express. I knew that 26 years of abstaining from reading the book will pay off. It is so captivating once you enter the mindspace of never taking any plot point at face value, the clues at depth, the characters always mix lies with the truth in their discourse, and the reveal is brilliant. But that's thanks to Agatha. What did the game add? Well, it takes place in the present, or the future to be more precise.
The protagonist.
Very nice dynamic. Poirot is very polite but emotionally detached and with a high opinion of himself.
My little grey cells did not let me down.
Don't mind him, just talking to the realest
Person.
that he knows. While the new character, a cop dealing with a kidnapped child case, is very emotionally invested, dealing with a lot of pressure. The flaws now. Confronting liars is an interesting premise. It's what made me play it, but it never has that tension I was expecting. Also, the low budget shines through when you realize no one is ever moving, and the fanfiction part at the end is more of the same instead of adding a new dimension. It's not even the first time. Viewfinder. The best thing about games that chase the Portal audience is the unwritten rule that you can't copy Portal. If you want to do that, just make a mod. So all Portal clones, even the unsuccessful ones, have an original gimmick. I wish all genres were like that. And what a gimmick this one has. It needs no words. And then you're blown away the second time when you can take your own photos and make them real. And that's kind of it. The game constantly tutorializes a new type of puzzle, then makes the smallest iterations possible, and just before you can start to use your brain, level over. The worst thing about it is that there probably won't be a copy of this game that's more challenging.
Hang on. Did you nick my biscuit?
Me?
Eggwife. This one claims to be inspired by Postal 2, and in a way it is more of a Postal successor than Postal 3, 4, and brain damaged, because instead of relying on dated references, it's simply chaotic and takes itself seriously 0%. And that 0% is a number I have actually calculated, because a lot of comedy, not just in games, just gives me the vibe of laugh at this if you're cool, punctuated by seeing how many comedians take themselves super seriously in real life. It's not higher on the list, because later on it becomes just gross. It lacks anything true to life to contrast its absurdity against it, so in my opinion, it might be a short game, but it would have benefited from being even shorter. To end on a positive note, here's my tribute to it. The safe place. There are genres like Diablo-like, Metroidvania or survival crafting within which I can hardly stomach the best examples. And then at the opposite side there are point-and-click games which I have been enamored with and I've tried to get into almost every year since 2008, and this year it finally happened due to this video and the game on the second place. Unfortunately I played this one right after and the comparisons did not help. While the vistas are nice, the animations are inexcusable. And the puzzles vary from very fun and logical to how was I supposed to think of that. Although you can abuse the hint system by loading the game, but the most mixed feelings pertain to the story. They had the perfect backdrop for a grounded story about some random schmuck struggling to make ends meet in 1990s Ukraine and whichever troubles that could entail, but they had to shoehorn some American blockbuster scenarios about accidentally killing a guy or trying to confront an ex-con who is about to murder his daughter, with the execution lacking any sort of tension or relatability. Nevertheless, if you are not bothered by that, I think the atmosphere is compelling enough to compensate. One final complaint, fuck! By not separating text and audio language, they deprived me of the superior Ukrainian dub.
Bastards. They have forced people to take extreme measures by turning them into beggars and thieves.
Негідники. Вони доводять людей до крайностей. Перетворюють на голодранців, злодіїв.
Conquer humanity. This is like Hatred, but instead of a mass shooter, you are evil Superman. We could have had both, as shown by Call of Duty. So, as you might have guessed, you are invincible, as in incredibly vincible. In fact, you spend a lot of time fleeing. But still, it excels at what it wants to do. It's just that it doesn't want to do a lot. Escape from Lavender Island. Just look at this shit, and yet it does two important things better than many open world games. An interesting world to get to know, especially if you are into dream logic, and fun traversal options, but I wish the controls weren't so floaty. I can accept an experimental game not having the best controls, when you can open a door with an exploding car, not so much in a platformer. Miasma Chronicles. Another genre that I finally got into this year relates to games that are based on turns, transition. Miasma is about a short guy with a mechanical arm with superpowers who looks for his mom together with a robot that he calls Big Brother. I even put the song to be as unsubtle as them. But hey, it made me play the game. The tactical gameplay is either satisfying as fuck when you're efficient, or frustrating when you fuck up. But that's turn-based for you. My problem is that outside of combat, it's an Ubisoft open world with a boring hub instead of the exhilarating resource management of the usual tactics game. And the world is so-and-so on the immersion front. I've seen worse. Oh, the robot has an African-American VA, which leads to some funny situations.
Sick of being alone. Just want some family.
What? You got your family right here. Me.
Yeah, but Diggs, you're a...
Don't do it! I'm warning you, do not do it!
Yet another Zombie Survivors. Let me start by defending the title from the Stroke allegations. It's a sequel to yet another Zombie Defense, and although that title fit well in 2010, nowadays zombie games aren't that common. Survivors comes from a new genre created by Vampire Survivors, a roguelike where your avatar attacks at set intervals and levels up constantly, improving and adding new abilities. Apparently this genre is a get-rich-quick scheme since around 100 appeared in a very timely fashion. So what sets this one apart? Well, first of all, it's calibrated very well. The enemy speed, your speed, the damage inflicted, and the good animations make this what I call semi-game feel like an actual game. On top of that, you can always control 3 characters at the same time, with many possible combinations, so you are actually capable of self-expression instead of always choosing to level up the ability you have already leveled up. Some people complained about the repetitive music, but it did not bother me that much, probably since it was composed by Kevin MacLeod. Wanted Dead. I'm gonna have to plagiarize 2 YouTubers. First of all, as Renton says, the story oscillates between Kojima and Ajimok. But even Kojima's games oscillate between Kojima and Ajimok. Gameplay. It looked awful from the trailers, and it plays awful when you don't know what you're doing, but it's a similar situation to Infernal, where a certain unintuitive playstyle basically turns shit into gold. So thank you Electrica Underground for showing me that 1, if you block during any move, you cancel it, so you can string basically any 2 moves together like a master, and 2, it's not a cover shooter, but it's not a sword game either, so you have to know when to do one thing or the other. So with those 2 things in mind, you can join the ranks of Wanted Dead enjoyers. Oh, by the way, if the exact same game had good graphics and was made by a known developer, it would have gotten 8s and 9s. Daymare 1994. This year, fans of third-person action horror ate well. Let me begin by saying that this game perfectly captures the atmosphere of a 90s American sci-fi action movie a la Independence Day, Men in Black or Demolition Man. It's surreal, no other game does it, not even Resident Evil. It's so cozy, and it's also helped by the splendid graphics. It went the opposite way of many other developers who could make magic with Unreal Engine, and years later they released a shittier looking game that needs a rocket ship to work. While those guys started out with Daymare 1998, which looked like an asset flip, and 1994 stands firm aside any recent Resident Evil remake. Gameplay is interesting. When I started playing, it was the first horror game where your enemies were faster than you, even your freezer was puny against them. So I got good, I started seeing it as a rhythm game, and
Just when they thought I was back, kid, they pulled me out.
By updating the game to be easier. And now, some parts feel like 5 minutes of anticipation with barely any payoff on hard mode. But then, at the last start, I was starting to wonder how could a real human being finish the game in its initial state, given how frantic some parts were. And I had noticed that now, with the balance feeling just right, it's a good game. And it would have been from the beginning if it didn't take me on this roller coaster of emotions. So the ending impression was overall very positive. We need more indie games with big ambitions, but enough restraint. It's a wrap, an actual combination between puzzle and platformer. You are at the same time a stuntman and the director. You choose the order to do things, then the stuntman almost dies, then repeat ad nauseum until the scene is finally perfect. It's more fun in practice than in theory, but I also have a bias because I hate editing, and this was editing but fun. So it helped me get motivated to make this video. The structure among debris. Clones of Arkanoid, like clones of Portal, also have to find their original spin on things in order to dare to show their face, but this one fares pretty well. Its gimmick is air hockey, and the fact that it attempts to be fairly diegetic. You are actually destroying an existing building which attempts to defend itself. I don't know if it's a flaw of the game or the genre itself, but sometimes to win you need to be a prophet and see 1 second in the future. Regardless, it's a fun game to play after work. El Paso Elsewhere. 1% Max Payne, 1% The Suffering, 1% Shadow Man, and 97% the Constantine game from 2004. This started as a joke, but I actually used to think El Paso is the first Max Payne clone where you find the monsters instead of dudes with guns, with all the changes to gameplay that it entails. But because of Constantine, it's actually the second. From a quality standpoint, this game is comprised of 2 halves, with the first half holding the game back from being top 10 material. El Paso is at its best when you are in a space that's not too tight, but not too spacious either, where various types of monsters swarm you from all sides, and you have to dodge all the time and prioritize the most dangerous ones, switching weapons constantly due to reloading not being automatic, even when you're out, and also, according to the situation, maybe even using the environment cleverly in order to buy yourself some time, and just looking plain cool by switching tactics on the fly. Bam! A shoot dodge. Bam! A stake to the heart. Bam! A dive which ends up with you on the floor picking off the leftovers. But in the first half of the game, that happens maybe 25% of the time, with the rest of the fights being like, please zombies, no, be merciful, please, psych, and the incessant word salad.
I should be flattered. Reality is getting bent around me, flipped, distorted beyond repair, all to keep me from reaching the bottom.
Dude, you are a superhero. What's there to complain about? Well, when the main villain shows up, it becomes clear.
My God. James?
Hey.
I have to go back. I felt a ripple, so...
Oh yeah, no, don't worry about it. I'll be here.
I'm going to guess that since the protagonist's voice, the rapper in the background, the composer, and the game director are the same guy, this is a personal story. It's a breakup album with gameplay. And in this light, its protagonist's detached but incredibly neurotic attitude makes way more sense, since it's a direct translation of the guy's grief over losing his goth BPD girlfriend, allegedly. It just feels too real to be completely fictional. And also, in the second half, the aforementioned gameplay scenario occurs way more often. Svarog's Dream. Even in places where I discover the bulk of obscure games, the generic fantasy setting is rampant. It makes me write off so many of them. Not this one, since it's set in the fairly uncharted territory of Slavic folklore, and on top of that, many of its quests have a fairly out there premises, like for example a naked woman emerging from a lake asking you to undress, or a guy complaining that every night someone takes a shit in front of his house. It's a shame that the combat is fairly easy, some difficulty options would have been nice. Monolith. A mid-tier point-and-click game. I only gave it a chance because it's from one of the few semi-classic studios that survived and still make point-and-click games, the creators of the Secret Files series. The vistas are amazing, the puzzles are intuitive, and the atmosphere is nice and lonely, reminding me heavily of Morningstar Descent from Dead Rock. Yeah, hitting you with those high-caliber references. Just like their other games, it doesn't stand out but it doesn't offend either. But the most surprising fact about this game is that it was announced in 2014 with the exact same graphics and the exact same environments, but only a slight change. Apparently 10 years weren't enough for them to erect a monolith. Trepang 2. This game is the reason this channel exists. In 2019, after playing the first demo, I decided to play Fear again, and it was so glorious that I wrote my first ever review out of enthusiasm, describing it as a multiplayer match in single player. It's safe to say that all these years Trepang 2 was my most anticipated game, to the point that when it came out, I literally felt nothing while playing it, not negative, not positive, have a field day psychoanalyzing that. Well, first of all, the game is almost nothing like Fear. Fear is a power fantasy despite its name, while Trepang makes you feel like a Trepang. Get this, in Fear, slow motion can last you for a whole fight, and it auto-regenerates. You can carry health packs, so you basically have 15 human lives worth of bullets you can take, and the enemies die easily. Trepang, on the other hand, is 3 times faster, you die instantly from the middle difficulty onwards, you don't carry health packs, slow motion is very short lasting, and you have to kill for it to regenerate, but on the other hand you can slide with no stamina punishment and turn invisible. So in Trepang, you can't stay in the open at all, you will always resort to hit and run tactics, which would be fine, but the enemies have a high time to kill, and since slow motion is very limited, headshots will be rarer, especially when you face multiple enemies. This, paired with the fact that whenever you become visible it instantly depletes the bar, means that you do not have time to savor the gameplay, since you will always be under pressure to choose the most efficient tactic, which on hard mode was going invisible, taking a hostage, setting his grenade off and throwing him into others. Well, I started a new playthrough on the penultimate difficulty to be forced to not use that tactic, and even though I was spending 30 plus minutes on a fight, when I was pulling it off the game was reaching its potential, which was basically super hard but in real time, or let's hear it again, a multiplayer match in single player. Tell some story Foz. Shovelware. Well, I know a good game when I see one. That was contrived, I admit, but I'd rather cut out Baldur's Gate and Alan Wake than Sopranos from the video. It really is The Office for men, and those games receive enough free marketing already. This one actually needs it. How many linear crime games release per year? So what do I like about this? First of all, the structure. It has the balls to have the shooting only be 40% of the game, so the bulk of the experience is getting to know the world, with all its 100 achievements being about discovering little things and conversations. Shooting is fun, but a little linear. I don't really have time for PS3 nostalgia. I hope that doesn't contradict what I said in another segment. So, the story and the lore are what you're here for. In my case, there are 4 elements that make this work for me. The atmosphere is always thick. The writing is either poetic or the scribblings of a madman. and the next two will be make or break for you. The voices are text to speech, but I think they fit the emotions transmitted by the writing and atmosphere.
Что ты мне сказал на парковке?
Пути назад уже нет.
And the translation is awful, starting from the title. I thought I can't sell anybody on that, but I can. See, this is a story that actually benefits from you only understanding it partially. Think about Mulholland Drive. And the last circle of personal preference. I can't even read these words, even though I wrote them. So I thought of a solution appropriate in context.
I am one of the best non-native English speakers out there, if not the best.
So it was nostalgic for me to re-experiment a time when I could barely understand a game.
And you know what they say? Opposites attract.
Gone Rogue. This one is dedicated to the 24 channel veterans. This game is Winter Ember, but good. Blood West. It looks and sounds so generic. Wild West but with monsters is already played out, in my opinion. Not that it has to be this way. To make it work, you only need
creatividad.
And also it has zero art style. Did I mention it's a stealth open world game with RPG elements? Dead on Arrival, right? Fortunately, it's inspired enough to go the opposite way of a power fantasy and makes you weak as fuck. You die fast, you are discovered if you just continuously sneak towards a guy due to incremental noise, you remain without stamina if you hold your axe in the air for too long, and the ammo is very scarce. You have to actually use tactics, and on the plus side, the weapon impacts are satisfying, so it's always exhilarating to pull off a fight perfectly. Thronefall. When I saw the guy auto-attack, my eyes rolled 360 degrees and it was way out of the 2 weeks refund window. But it's actually a tactics game. You build your kingdom that you defend, and every round you choose to put up buildings for either resources or defense, basically always sacrificing something. By the last round, your heart is an atom. You basically invested everything in this. I'm a huge fan of racing games. They are like a shooter where the shooting never stops. But they don't get tedious, because driving is at the same time inherently relaxing. It's a nice effect. I prefer arcade racers. Midnight Club LA will always be my favorite, but for some reason they simply went away from the mainstream, like linear shooters. But unlike there, the indie scene is packed with 99% shovelware. Last year we were lucky for Trailout. In 2023 I was counting the months and nothing was coming out. Out of desperation, I gave a chance to Super Woden GP2, and it's more than meets the eye. I like the camera, it has the same effect as the one in survival horror games. The cars feel good, with the right amount of traction and downforce. And overtaking a car that's clearly faster than yours in a corner is a wonderful feeling, but it has a problem with its economy. I like when cars are expensive and you have to earn them, unlike fucking Forza Horizon, but when you can only use a car for specific events that it's qualified for, the grinding gets tedious. Oh, and never sell your cars. You're given shit money. That's how I had to restart, because I softlocked myself and the driver became homeless. F1 23. Yes, I'm that desperate. This game was so fun, it made me wish Formula 1 was real. It actually is. I started watching last year, not for the video though, that would have been too autistic even for me. The superb handling is a product of 13 years of making these, but the game looks worse than Dirt 2 from 2009. I'm sure it has more polygons, but the lighting is awful. But what you're all here for is the story. It's fucking surreal how everything is exactly like real life, except for this fictitious team, but also kind of immersive how you have to manage PR, answer emails, or read the tweets from based racist 1488. As for the plot itself, it's divided between the continuation to a game you can't pirate or buy anymore, thanks EA, and the story of an up-and-coming self-insert for what I suppose is the 50% female audience of Formula 1, but the story doesn't end with Charlie Clerk becoming her husband, so what's the point? Godfist. Instead of killing guys, you push them in water because they are invincible, and instead of normal controls, 3 abilities are rolled for you and you have to make do. It's held together by its originality, but some classes' starting abilities are less fun than others. But due to being roguelike, you can gain those abilities eventually. Wretched. I wholeheartedly approve of this game due to being a huge fan of first-person shooters released between 1998 and 2007. Unfortunately, the retro shooter trend, abundant as it may be, always miraculously stops at the 1997. Another less petty reason I don't engage with boomer shooters that much. Well, contrary to that, Wretched is basically Doom 3 2. Well, actually, it's more like Alpha Prime 2, but I like Alpha Prime. I'm actually holding up for a review for when the game comes out of early access, but know that it's not high on the list only due to appealing to me, but also due to how it handled updates. The game started with no flashlight, people complained, bam, flashlight. The enemy reactions kind of sucked, bam, they were updated, and so on and so forth. This is what early access should be. Keep an eye on this. 1997. I want to play more visual novels this year. In 2023 I hesitated because I would have felt like a hypocrite for excluding Alan Wake 2 from this list due to it not being game enough for me. Well, can you do this in Alan Wake? Nope. Voila, I'm not a hypocrite anymore. This one got my attention due to being set in my year of birth, otherwise I would have played something bigger like Paranormal Side. The mystery is interesting, but the anime style really doesn't fit a small Russian town. Even Babushka is yassified. The Will of Arthur Flemington. This one is really excellent, with very good puzzles, nice premise and humor that doesn't feel forced, using setups that pay off later. If it were released in 1996, it would be a classic now. It's also the kind of game I'm going to make one day. I procrastinated 2 years because I knew I didn't have it in me to design good killing, but something like this I can at least try. I just never considered making a non-action game before. So in a way this channel is also good for me, not only for you. To be perfectly immodest. Oh, and also it has the best poop joke I have ever heard.
Oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. Why? Why is this the only water around? I have no choice.
Fire to purify, air to give life, water to sustain it.
Yeah, that water sure sustained something.
Of course, you all knew I was going to include that RoboCop game Mega City Police. Actually, no bait and switch needed. RoboCop Rogue City is a good game and I'm glad everyone is enjoying it. So, let's get one thing out of the way, I'd buy that for $1. So the game is basically a modern version of The Darkness, atmospheric hub with fantastic lighting, a small but alive world to explore, a less than human protagonist who moves at a snail's pace, and dialogue that oscillates heavily between immersive and written by aliens. On top of all that, it also has amazing feeling gunplay, even better than Trepang. But to properly enjoy it you will have to disable the fucking crosshair with the hit markers, cause it distracts from the carnage. Since he's a cyborg, you can assume that RoboCop sees all these UI elements, so why would he need the hit markers? Is he that dumb that he can't parse a body reacting to bullets, or does he have a dopamine deficiency so he needs them in order to keep killing from the government? Mosa Lina. This is what I want Trine 6 to be now that I've accepted that we won't ever get Shadowgrounds 3. You get 3 random tools, a random level, and hopefully your inspiration. The fact that you can't even reload the level if you fuck up means that you will need to be at your most cautious and creative to succeed, which feels rewarding. Resident Evil 4. Let's start with my biggest nitpick. Leon's face has way less personality and grit about it. It's like, wait, Romanian? Oh, scuze șefule.
Și-am fost lele la frizer, m-a lăsat cu chel.
Okay, the game. It's as close to a perfect shooter as Romanianly possible. Every step you take, every direction that you choose, every bullet that you fire, every enemy that you prioritize will have consequences that will follow you upwards of 30 minutes. Every moment in the game is you responding to the consequences of you responding to something. That's how well the enemy speed, their damage and the number of bullets and healing items are calibrated. It's the magic of fully adapting to the changes that you made to a game, since RE4 was already perfect, so everything that they did on one side had to have a counter reaction to the other side to keep that very tight balance, and this is what Dead Space Remake did not do. This is the description of Game of the Year, and yet it's not even the top 10. First of all, I despise unnecessary remakes, so it already couldn't be in the top 5. But on top of that, we already had a modern reimagining of RE4 in the form of Village just 2 years before. Sure, it wasn't half as good, but at least it was semi-original. The lighting and contrast are completely inferior to the OG, good textures on their own mean nothing without art direction, and to top it all off, the plot of the original was already bad. If it were a movie, you would figure that out instantly. So all it had for it was the brilliant comedy, which was either removed.
Since you're here, why don't I introduce you to it? It should keep you busy.
Can't remember the name, huh? A senior moment, perhaps.
Replaced with a version that is completely unremarkable.
Well, I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude!
Hey, I see you found your missing señorita.
Señorita has a name and it's Ashley.
Or worst of all, left intact with way worse delivery.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Shardpunk. More like Sharkpunk, am I right? No, it's number 14 on this list. Why did you think that? What I just said about Resident Evil and how every single choice that you make will be met with an equal reaction by the computer that will put you on edge constantly applies here. And that's punctuated by the constant flow of enemies that you do not actually have to take head on, but rather judge if you want to flee with the risk of being sandwiched or enter combat and expend resources more suited for the next encounter. It's obviously easier for it than for Resident Evil since it's turn-based, but at least it's an original product. Oblivion Override. I usually avoid the genre like the plague, but there is something appealing and comforting about this one. The combat feels really smooth, and you are really encouraged to stay in the air, which is always adrenaline inducing. But you can also say that about last year's Moonscars, which I did not even include in my video, preferring instead to put shit like Sex with Hitler and tank my viewership after the first minute. No, it's not that. Okay, I'm gonna say it. It's the graphics. Not only I'm gonna crown them attention to detail and art style of the year, but bravely declare that graphics are just as important as gameplay in every single game. Graphics detail atmosphere, they contain the most apparent mark of the game's identity and soul. They are the only reason the mainstream still puts AAA gaming above indie despite all the reasons not to. They are just as important in real life. And best thing of all, I can name a legendary game whose gameplay is subpar, and the story is completely stolen from its predecessor, but people subconsciously influenced by its amazing art style still consider it a masterpiece. So, what game is it? Here, let me tell you. You might have guessed, I love playing 100 games per year, so for me 50 hours in a game are more like 1000 hours for an average Steam user. One of the games that I played for that amount of time is Death Stranding, because it managed to make the most mundane and filler aspect of any open world, that of traversal, into a compelling mechanic that takes into account quite an amount of factors. And failing at the game is not due to bad reflexes, but due to a miscalculated risk which many times occurs on top of a string of bad choices. So in a way, it took what I love about racing games, unlike for example GTA, where driving feels like commute. It's an experiment that worked for so many people, and I'm happy it exists. And a tiny sliver of that satisfaction is found in Roussan, or as I call it, the third Strand game, after Avengers from 1998 and Death Stranding obviously. Its main draw is the climbing controls, which sort of simulate the neural network involved in climbing. AKA, instead of pressing forward to awesome, like in Uncharted, you press left click to grab with one hand, right click with the other, you release it to leave the hand free, and press forward to extend your arm. You can't actually fall, because you have your bungee cord, but the game is still tense, because you can remain without stamina, like in I Am Alive, in which case you go home I guess. The game also gets puzzly when you have to, for example, add a new Python to be able to descend before you ascend. The controls never cease to be immersive, and it helps that the game has a very engrossing world with lore that I'm going to let you discover for yourself. Void Stranger. The moment you enter the world, the spoon feeding stops. Every instance of world building is a puzzle piece, and there's no one to put it in context for you. Kind of like real life. If you upset me, I will do the comparison, and the puzzles are very addictive. Vivid Loop. No other game manages to capture the soul of the 2000s like this one. So you have to step on every segment of a grid with the fewest possible moves, there are enemies. I can't think of any flaw, just play it. 0 negative reviews. I will even complain about my game of the year. Oh, I guess I hate the fact that it didn't become a hit, like a Pizza Tower. When I played the demo I was sure it will, but that's more the fault of society. Last Train Home. I really appreciate the existence of this. It feels like historical games have monopolized the 3 or 4 subjects, and the thousands of remaining events will never be represented. Luckily, this game is from the Czech Republic, a country which produced the highest amount of decently true-to-life games. Let's hope that doesn't also apply to the future portrayed in Alternative A. This time it's about the modern foundational myth of this land. When a few thousand men without a nation fought in World War I to help establish Czechoslovakia, and because they couldn't return to their fresh country through the west because of the ongoing war, they had to take a train Indian style through Russia during the civil war between the imperialistic whites and the Bolshevik reds, while struggling to maintain diplomacy. The game has the structure of a turn-based strategy with an emphasis on cover types, small squads, instead of a legion you control
16 Czechoslovakians.
and management gameplay in between fights, but it's actually an RTS, another reason I find it interesting. The combat and the management have been accused of being shallow, but in my opinion they create a cohesive whole, complementing each other. A criticism that I agree with is that they turned a complex tale into a heroic G.I. Joe romp. I'm sure the next game about the subject released in 30 years will solve this issue. So I mentioned before that I am disappointed that with all this technology indie FPS games stop at 1997 for their era of inspiration. Zorch does a great step forward by feeling like a game from 1998. Okay, it was a joke, but seriously, this game genuinely has me stumped. It feels so authentic to that era, while all other boomer shooters feel like amateurish imitations, and I genuinely can't put my finger on why. So I'll just list what I do know. The pacing is fantastic, the movement feels smooth, the enemies are relentless, they jump to your level and chase you. The physics and general aesthetic feel more like Ratchet & Clank than anything else. That alone is interesting enough, and best of all, it's 5 times cheaper than the usual shooter and also made on a custom engine, so it doesn't borrow its feel from Unity or Unreal. I've listed all this shit and I still don't feel like I could accurately describe the dynamic of this game, nor does looking at gameplay, so I can only say one thing: if you like shooters, play it. Jagged Alliance 3. This is not my first Jagged Alliance. I played 2 for 15 minutes until I realized I need a month to properly enjoy it, which I didn't have because of this video. So why did I mention this useless fact? Because I love myself. A wonderful feeling. But I am still glad that a Legacy sequel had a very positive reaction, even if I wasn't familiar with the series. The combat is obviously wonderful, pulling off an interesting tactic with the team you concocted is heavenly. And what I love about the genre is that enemies are allowed to make good choices, since they can only make one at a time. If they had this freedom in a real-time game, we would all quit gaming. And you can be a good tactician, but if you are a lousy businessman between fights, you can back yourself into a corner. This would be my game of the year, but the world has no authenticity, everyone is a caricature, and it's a real shame, especially since Africa is basically the perfect setting for every single genre. And in many of them, we literally only have one game, so squandering the potential hurts more. The Talos Principle 2. How do you top excellent puzzles? With expanded world building and continuing the themes from the first game, but at a higher level. All sequels should be like this instead of more of the same. This year we had a successor to Max Payne, one to Fear and one to Hotline Miami, and they were all called Ocho. This needs to be studied by every dev making an action game. It has no design flaws. This AI is very good. They only swarm you when you are vulnerable and hide, ambush or flank you when you're in a good position. Adding health and a combo meter, which increases the multiplier, means that you will want to learn to be more aggressive, and when you do, you will start to lead your shots, dance through bullets, or play cat and mouse. The reward will be more currency that buys you substantial status effects. It's weird to think I almost did not include it. I downloaded it, it stayed on my computer for 6 months, then I said,
I got my own fucking problems.
I uninstalled it, and I only gave it a second chance when it came with the January Humble choice. So I'm playing it right now, and you will too, because it's a roguelike. You can do 20-minute sessions. Point and clicks are like...
It seems that reports of my survival have been greatly
unexaggerated. Adventure games are a 3-generation household, because nowadays the releases include their predecessor, text adventures, point and clicks themselves, their children, Telltale style cinematic games, walking simulators, narrative puzzle games, and survival horrors, which are point and click games with a limited inventory and combat. Take for example Living Cell, which I excluded from this video for pacing purposes. It's got item puzzles, health and resource management, but no enemies, so it's an evolution of the genre. Another one is the exemplary Stasis Bone Totem. The main way it evolves is that it actually feels like an adventure instead of rubbing together objects until something happens, like a caveman. It does that by making all the puzzles veridic. You navigate a dilapidated environment using its own technology against itself, and also by controlling 3 characters which can use objects in different ways. So instead of thinking in terms of let's guess the game's logic, you actually embody the characters. Immersion. The story is my 3rd favorite in games, like ever. It starts out as a generic tale of exploring a place where everybody died. I think there are a few of these in the video, but becomes a multi-layered plot where no one is a hero or villain. The only bad part is that the ending is from any action game from like 2010. It's the only thing they haven't improved from the first Stasis. You might remember what I said. I can accept an experimental game not having the best controls when you can open a door with an exploding car. That's Alone in the Dark from 2008, a very ambitious project full of interesting ideas, like a lighter becoming a flamethrower in tandem with a healing spray, being able to sound the horn by mistake while not riding a car, or setting fire to an object and killing enemies, but it was hated for its overall awful execution. I was able to tolerate the lack of quality of life features, but I still did not enjoy it because it simply wasn't scary. You were stuck with the resources and there was no pressure on you. You had to be really negligent in order to obtain an emergent story, like when Minnie was bleeding and scavenged 5 cars to no avail before succumbing. And I was disappointed because I knew this philosophy would make for a great horror game. But there is absolutely zero creativity in this genre. They should be the most creative of all. Horror, like comedy, is based primarily on surprise. So why is every horror game so generic then? Well, that was a case of serendipity, because literally 1 week after playing it, Amnesia the Bunker came out. A game where every single object is multi-purpose, where the only way to save is in the center of the map, so the deeper you go, the more you have to lose, so the scarier the game gets, and where only you can trigger the monster with your negligence. There are only 3 scripted encounters with him. So the line between a plan that you can never fully trust and desperate scrambling is always fragile. It applies my favorite life outlook. Everything is everything, because the butterfly effect is always 5 millimeters away from you. In a way, horror games are the perfect games, because immersion is the main quality of any game. And horror will always immerse you, because fear is what any person would feel in a video game situation. If I were Kratos, I would fear for my life constantly, no matter how athletic, masculine or brave I am, because self-preservation is the most basic instinct. So if you do that well, and on top of that you add the flexibility that's theoretically possible in every video game, even if it's absent from 90% of them, you obtain the perfect game. But I promised I will still complain about it. Well, you can theoretically go wherever you want, but to get the shotgun you have to go to 3 out of 4 places, so in my playthrough I only got it at the end when I had no more use for it. Anyway, How the game plays is not the reason it's Game of the Year. Remember how I said 2021 was the last straw for the gaming industry for me? It wasn't Cyberpunk, it was Amnesia Rebirth, and the trailers for Redfall and Saints Row. It was obvious that I wasn't the intended audience anymore. Anyway, Amnesia Rebirth, a sequel 10 years after The Dark Descent basically revived horror, and 5 years after the best story in Western gaming, had everything that's wrong with modern gaming. But instead of doubling down, they fucking addressed everything and went the complete opposite way. It's a rare, if not the only rebound story in this cynical era. Also, I went the whole segment without mentioning the I word. Oh yeah, I almost forgot.